All right, sure. Okay. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda or?
So moved.
Yes. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, okay, let's get started. Is Tiffany Khan here? Tiffany Khan, she's a member of the public who wanted to speak with us about the CB9 resolution.
Last year, maybe.
Oh, she on Zoom, maybe. Alex, is Tiffany Khan on Zoom? I thought she was attending in person.
Let me see. Yeah, I see Tiffany Khan on Zoom.
Okay, do you mind promoting her? Maybe we
Yep.
can.
Absolutely. One moment. Tiffany, you can unmute.
Hi, everyone. I apologize for, sorry, I'm just trying to, using a computer that's not mine. There we go. Hi, everyone.
Oh.
Yes, I'm actually at another event, so I apologize for not being able to be there in person. And I know you have a lot on your agenda. Thanks so much for allowing me to squeeze this into your time. I'm presenting on a resolution that I wrote a few years ago. I have had this presentation with Committee Board 9. At the time, I was on the Housing, Land Use and Zoning Committee. I've also presented it to CB 12 and 10, and it's been quite favorably received. Anyhow, without further ado, really quickly, this is about the current HPD grant. It is called the Home First Grant. It is for first-time home buyers. There are certain income restrictions along with other limitations with respect to family size, and applicants cannot have owned a home in, I believe, at a minimum 5 years. The funds actually come from the federal government, from HUD, but they are dispersed to different municipalities, and HPD is the government agency that is administering the program. They do this through different nonprofits across the city. If you visit, I can send you the link if you'd like for HPD. For example, NHS, that's Neighborhood Housing Services. I myself went through the program twice, and there are a number of problems with this program. It can be a wonderful dream, but sometimes it can feel like a nightmare when you're going through the process. The resolution that I wrote, I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to read it. I know it was a little bit last minute, but in a nutshell, affordable housing is often top of the list. It is certainly top of the list in Community Board 9, in neighborhoods like Harlem, Washington Heights, Inwood, and so on. But this is really a nationwide problem, to be honest. And especially for people that are graduating from college, that are trying to start families, and so on and so forth. The biggest barrier to home ownership for a lot of people in this generation tends to be the down payment, which is typically 20% of the total purchase price. This is supposed to be a way of overcoming that by helping with 20% up to $100,000. I understand on the Upper West Side and other neighborhoods, some people might feel like, well, we don't have a lot of houses here. Perhaps not, but there are a number of co-ops and even some Mitchellamas. So this is something that I think would be a tremendous help to a lot of people, regardless of what zip code or which neighborhood you live in. I'm not going to rattle on all the paragraphs, which you can read whenever you have time. But the one thing that I wanted to highlight was paragraph 3, which is the fact that the middle class, we tend to build our equity through home ownership. Most people who own a home tend to have a net worth of at least $336,000 compared to renters that tend to only have $5,700 of net worth. And if you are a person of color, Black or Hispanic in particular, the disparities are much greater. The other issue that so I'm not going to get into all the whys. This is something that most of us know on this board, but just going back to this program and why it's so problematic. Number one, the application fee is $850. just wrap your minds around the fact that this is a program that is designed for low to moderate income individuals. $850. And I've since been told that it's actually much higher than that. I myself, like I said, went through the program in 2016, did not realize all of the additional hidden hurdles. So I wound up abandoning it in 2016 and then again in 2021, had to go through the program. Sorry. Yes. In 2021, and the second time I did it, it was through HCCI, which is Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement. So besides the application fee, the other concern is the turnaround time to process the applications. HPD has one person that is working on this issue, and the solution is to allow different nonprofits to process the applications, but I find that they're not, it takes insanely long. My application alone took 7 months to process. If you are a seller and hypothetical, parent passed away, the house is now going through surrogate court or whatever it is, you're just trying to sell this house and you have property taxes that you have to pay. No one wants to sit around and wait 6-7 months for an application. I've heard horror stories of it taking even longer. No one wants to wait this much time. Some sellers will go on to the next buyer. So yeah, as we know, Martin Luther King said, a dream delayed is a dream denied. Sorry, it wasn't King. An application delayed is an application denied. So the two asks that I have here are that we encourage HPD to reduce the application fee to $250, which I believe is more than reasonable. And also that the duration not be more than a month. Most mortgage financial institutions such as banks, credit unions that are issuing mortgages don't need more than 4 to 6 weeks to process your document. So there really isn't any excuse or any reason why it should take this long. That's it. Thank you.
Got it. Can I open up to any questions?
Yeah,
I don't know if
please.
people have a chance to actually read
Has
the
this
resolution.
been brought to any other boards who, like, has this, a similar action been taken up by any other boards besides Board 9?
I'm sorry, did you ask if I?
Can you maybe repeat because you're closer?
So the question is whether or not this has been taken up by boards in addition to Board 9?
Oh, yes. So I presented it to Community Board 10. That's Charles Powell, who's the chair of that board. He was very much interested. Everyone on that call was interested. Unfortunately, it was very, I think it was not on their agenda. So I was supposed to return. I'm a candidate for city council right now. I'm sorry. I've just been really busy in the last year. So I haven't had time to return to CB10 and CB12 as well. But here I am. I will be presenting to Community Board 10 again though, during the next Housing Committee meeting. But again, it's been favorably received by those two boards.
Oh, I was just curious, is this fully funded by the federal government? And if so, which division is funding it? And then I was just curious, who gets the application fee?
Yeah, those are great questions. So I don't know if 100% of the funding comes from HUD, and it's HUD, HUD, Housing Urban Development. But the application fee is HPD, from what I understand.
Oh, so it's the city that sets the application fee for the federal program.
Right. So, well, and that's on top of the fees that the nonprofits also charge. So NHS is Neighborhood Housing Services. They also have a contract with the city, but you can do this through different nonprofits like HCCI, which is one that I went through. That's again, Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement. They actually do not charge a fee, HCCI, but NHS does. So at the time when I applied in 2016, the fee was about, they had two fees. There was one that was about $300, and then there was another that was $70. So the $300, so you have to go through a workshop. That workshop can be 4 different days over 1 month, or in the case of NHS, it was 2 days, but all day. from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on a Saturday, and I think it was a Saturday.
Shelley?
Any
So those
idea,
are, so those are additional fees, by the way, which I didn't mention.
any idea in that district that, that this District 9 or in the larger area of the West Side, Manhattan, that how many people have taken advantage of this?
That is a fantastic question. And I put in a FOIL request for it because I'm looking for data to show that there's something very wrong with this program in a way. It's, I suspect, I should probably not say that. No, I don't know. I'm gonna stop
Okay.
there. I don't want to say something that might offend anyone.
Any other
I have a
questions?
question. Has there been any feedback from HED on this, on these two proposals? Because I imagine what they might say is, well, we don't have enough, funding to process these applications in a month. And then you're going to reduce the amount of fees we're collecting. In which case there might just need to be like additional funding from elsewhere so to make these two things happen in simultaneously.
So into that, I would say in response, how much money do we currently spend on homelessness? If we spend $120 per bed per night on what I call the homelessness industrial complex, there are a lot of people that are profiting off of our unhoused. In fact, I'm at another meeting right now on homelessness in America. And I feel like this is just inertia and excuses. We can absolutely reduce the homelessness crisis that we have in this country if we have the will to do so. And if you look at shelters across the city, it is deplorable to see what some of these executive directors earn per year running homeless shelters. Some of you may have read in the New York Times a few years ago about a children's complex homeless shelter where it was somewhere in the tens of millions of dollars that were stolen also. But that is a more egregious case. In other cases where it's not theft, we see exorbitant fees that are charged for things like this. So I don't believe for 1 second that we don't have the finances to hire more people at HPD to process these applications.
Can I make a suggestion? Why don't we do a little bit of research? We'd love to maybe talk to HPD about this. Maybe you can also help us with some of the data and the questions that came up, and then we can take this up again either at our May meeting or June. Does that sound okay?
That's perfect. And I submitted FOIL requests because I also wanted to get a sense of which, for example, nonprofits are processing the most applications. But we can speak offline about why I'm asking that question.
Yeah. That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Okay. Welcome, Erica. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No. Hi, Erica Overton from Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal's office. She is the chair of the Assembly Committee on Housing. So really fun budget that we're having, but not here or there. But I was talking to CB7 because we just passed out of our housing committee a week or two ago, a piece of legislation that does, speaking of HUD and rules that have been overturned since the new administration came into power, we're codifying President Biden's artificial intelligence rules into New York state law that put put guardrails around artificial intelligence in tenant selection. And so right now, artificial intelligence, it's used all the time everywhere. And a lot of management companies use third companies to farm this out. They have thousands of applications, tens of thousands of applications, depending on how big they are. And so they are using AI to sort through all of those applications. And so there are, of course, some issues that happen because AI is imperfect. And most of what they're using is machine learning. So it's the data you put in. The machine does not have any context for the data that is being put in. It just says, if you give it a score and say, this is what I'm looking for, they will just go along with it. And they don't get housing law or discrimination. And so the machine bypasses that, essentially, which creates a lot of issues, and why President Biden had put in a bunch of, they had approved a bunch of rules to put guardrails on this to prevent discrimination there. And so I don't know if you want me to, so what the bill does essentially is says any landlord who is using this, any third party who is using this, it has to go through a disparate impact analysis. So it has to go to the AG, so we can look at what the landlord is using, what their data, what their software, what software they're using, how they're scoring tenants, the criteria they're using. Right now, they don't have to say any of that. So it's just, you could say this credit score is really important. You could say about crime, about people who've committed crimes, etc. But the thing about AI is it confuses a lot of people with last names. If you have a similar last name, they confuse a bunch of people. So there have been federal lawsuits where just because someone had the same name who committed a crime, they lived across the country, they had nothing to do with each other. That person was denied housing based on this other person's records, which happens quite frequently. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau also had federal lawsuits for people, TransUnion, for example, for tenant selection issues. And so a lot of these things happen, but people don't know about it. So they have no idea, because you have no way, the landlord doesn't have to tell you why. So you have no idea that AI is being used to sort your application. You don't know what criteria has been used. You have no idea why you have really been rejected. And so this bill codifies what President Biden had done of, you have to have an analysis. It's going to go to the Attorney General. So we're looking at what systems you're using. And sorry. And also it's going to allow you to opt out if you do not want if you don't want your application to go through artificial intelligence, if you want somebody to actually look at it. That's also an option. And also the landlord will have to give you a reason for why you were rejected, and you have to have an ability to clear whatever issue may or may not happen. It could be true. It could have happened, and your credit score or something related to you were denied that way. But if you don't know, of why. If you have no idea why you were denied, then you can't fight back any reason. And so people of color are generally discriminated most when it comes to AI. And so trying to break down those barriers. And so that's what the bill does.
Is a piece of legislation being introduced, and are you asking for support of this group?
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
So this was
that?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is the bill I was saying that was passed out of the Housing Committee a couple weeks ago, where we're codifying President Biden's rules from 2024 to put guardrails on AI tenant selection in New York State. And this one, there will be an analysis of everybody who's using, any landlord, third party who is using a tenant selection software. It would be reviewed and have to be submitted to the AG's office for review, which they do in other AI cases, to make sure that the information being put in and all of the risk assessments and all of that is not violating housing law.
Two things. One, do you have a copy of the rest of the?
I don't have it with me, but
Can you give it to
Yeah.
Seema?
Yep.
Yeah,
I think it's, or it's.
We've read it.
The second,
Yeah.
the second question is this.
Mhm.
Is there any, suppose a landlord submits his AI data,
Mhm.
and the AG doesn't like what they see?
Mhm.
What then?
So then it is the AG will promulgate those rules of what they do, but you'll have to use, you won't be able to use that. Either they'll make recommendations and they'll say this software company has to change this X, Y, and Z, or you have to choose
But
another.
is there a penalty imposed on the
believe there-
landlord?
No,
for
no, no, I
not-
don't believe there's a
Fine.
penalty imposed on the landlord.
So
They
it's
don't know. A lot of, and just to be really clear, a lot of the landlords do not know. It's being farmed to third parties who are using this software. Sometimes the landlord has no idea what type of information is being put in. And so even at HUD, they said, that doesn't absolve you though, if you break any housing discrimination laws. So it's also good for landlords to know exactly what they're using. Yeah.
Would the landlords have to proactively give this to the AG?
Yes.
So this would put a significant additional bureaucratic or administrative burden on the landlords.
They would just have to submit what software they are using. Yes. Yeah.
Is there
Okay, but the software is, I'm sure, it's always changing, I'm sure.
It is, and that's also part of the problem.
But they,
yeah.
so they submit it one time,
Mhm.
and when it comes to a denial, sometimes there are hundreds of applicants for a particular space, and it's hard to say why 99, any one of the 99 who didn't get it.
Mhm.
What would be required in that case?
What do you mean? Like what?
You said that
So you just need
someone
to
can
spit out-
request a justification for the denial.
Yep,
So-
so if I'm denied, I could say, could you just tell me why I'm denied? So like, yeah, so you could say, why am I denied? And they would look up your record and say, well, we dinged you for, you had a misdemeanor in 1992 or something, and that doesn't fit in the criteria that we had. And then you could appeal that. if
But
you want.
suppose there are like 100 people applying for one apartment, and one of them happens to be Bill Gates. Like, what do you say to the other 99?
Well, I mean, if there's no, I don't know if there's a right answer to that, but if
Well,
you are not,
there's an answer under the law that you're telling me. You have to give an answer. So what should the answer be in that
the
case?
answer is, why did you deny them? Maybe did you deny, like, what other reason did you deny them for? People are
Because Bill
losing
Gates would be a
housing.
great tenant.
Okay, but we're not really talking about Bill
No, but
Gates here.
that's-
That's like not a real
Well,
situation. I don't like, no, like, I'm not gonna be applying for the same apartment
Is
as
it
Bill
an
Gates.
adequate answer for the landlord to say that we had a better applicant?
Yes.
But isn't that always the case?
No, not always, not in the federal lawsuits and other things that people have found out of why they were denied.
So.
I mean, there's actually like federal, if you wanted to look it up, there's like federal lawsuits of why people
But,
have
yeah,
been denied
The
and what,
denied applicant wouldn't have access to the accepted applicant
they
data.
sue, they do.
Oh, yes, they can get them that one.
Okay, someone's,
yeah,
Does this apply to all landlords, like regardless of size?
all landlords, yeah.
So even if they have one apartment. in the
Gotcha.
building.
I read through this, I mostly like it. One thing I'm concerned about, and I wondering if you guys have looked into the potential of landlords passing on manual review costs to tenants through fees and such. Have you looked into that at all?
No, it's a great question though. Yeah, I like that.
Uh,
Which they already also do pass on those, yes. Yeah.
One comment about the bill specifically, just I think like the definition of like data analysis, statistical analysis,
Mhm.
and the fact that it would also cover credit scores, I
Yeah.
think means that this is like very broad and would not be actually particularly helpful. So don't love it for that reason. I think the second thing though that I'm more concerned about is I would prefer if we were focused on individuals who are making discriminatory decision-making. And I think that a better first step would be to mandate that co-ops have to declare why they didn't allow an applicant in long before we deal with like a potential problem.
That's
with-
already a piece of,
That's already-
that's already, yeah, that's
already a
already a
law,
piece
though.
of legis,
But it's never,
It's not a
it's
law.
never.
Um,
So I
Tell you why
just
it's
personally, I think.
no, I
that's
hear you. It's
much
just not our
clearer.
bill. It's somebody else's bill.
Yeah,
So I hear you.
well,
Yeah.
You guys run the housing committee, right?
It's, yeah, but it's not, they haven't brought it, like, it's not ready
This
for
isn't
us to view.
Just
So,
that going after discrimination, it's also going after, what is it, price fixing?
Which
through-
doesn't actually happen.
Yes, it does.
It does.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if this bill also includes management companies, real estate brokers who often participate on behalf of a landlord to make recommendations for candidates. Obviously, the
yeah.
lease is signed between two principals, landlord and tenant.
Right.
But very often there are third parties that are very much involved in the selection process.
No, that makes sense. I don't know. I'll check with our LD. I don't think so though.
So you mentioned, and I think I read, but perhaps misunderstood until you mentioned it, and it sounded different.
Yeah.
An opt-out provision
Yes,
for the tenant,
yes.
which would give the tenant, as I read it, and then it sounded a little different,
Mhm.
the applicant, I should say, not
The
tenant,
applicant,
the
yeah, yeah,
applicant,
the option to opt out of the scrutiny that most tenants would be subjected to,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so here's my concern when I read it.
Mhm.
So as with, say, opting out of the SAT,
Mhm.
there's always the fear that if I opt out, I would be penalized for opting out.
That makes sense.
And there's no way to really protect against that, but I wanted to flag that as the concern that I had when I read that. I like the opt-out provision.
Yeah.
But there's always that anxiety that comes,
Sure.
should I opt out? I want to opt out, but then I'm going to be penalized for opting out, so I'm opting in.
That makes sense. Yeah,
So
no,
I just wanted to flag.
I hear that. Okay.
I also want to make the point, even if this didn't pass, it doesn't absolve any landlord from the discrimination provisions. They're still subject to them whether or not they use
Yeah.
AI.
That's true. But people don't know the thing, just to your point, is a lot of people do not know when
They're
someone is using AI, so
Yeah.
that you don't know that you've been discriminated against.
Okay, move it along.
Yeah.
So what, are you asking us to pass a resolution? Is that?
Or just to have a discussion. It is moving in the Senate. It's referred to GovOps in the Senate, and now it's in codes in the Assembly. And so let's just say, yes, very behind on a budget. So none of our legislation right now is currently, that's not the first priority, I guess, for a lot of the central staff. So it's on hold for right now until, once that passes, then they'll start moving through the committees more quickly. And then we can talk then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just what, if we pass, it says a resolution?
Yeah.
Who should we send it to? How should we advocate for?
Yeah. I would say to the governor.
The government?
Yeah.
I missed that. What was the answer?
The governor.
The governor. Okay.
Oh.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Oh, do you want to say maybe one word about, or one sentence about federal funding and
yeah.
your take on it?
Not a good take. We are currently in the budget, we are fighting for the Housing Access Voucher Program, which would create New York-based Section 8 voucher for residents. DOGE is trying to cut 50% of Section 8 staff. So you don't have to take a hard vote on housing. You don't have to say if you support it or not, if you get rid of all the staff that administers it.
Right.
And so that is a very big concern. And the other concern is, as part of it was a Biden emergency housing voucher. It was during COVID. It was supposed to be funded until 2030. We have no idea what's exactly true, so I don't know, but HUD says, oh, the money's all gone. We're not going to do this anymore. Now, it'll be expired in 2026. 9,900 New Yorkers who were formerly homeless, who received these vouchers, would be homeless in 2026. And so the fear that they feel is quite palpable when you talk to them, because they literally just got housing and they're saying, I can't go back onto that street. And so HAVP would help those people. We could prioritize vouchers for them. And it would also go to people in shelter, as well as people who are on the precipice of eviction. But it's been an uphill battle. It was in the Assembly one House budget. It was in the Senate one House budget. Reddy supports it. From Reddy, us, to every other, if you think the most left group you could want, they support it. And we just had an op-ed today with those groups, actually, Christine Quinn, Reddy, us, and the Senate, the housing chair, urging the governor to put it in her budget. She has been the holdup this year and last year, year before. And so that is something that is deeply, deeply important, considering there's the funding at the federal level, it's devastating, honestly. So that is, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep us posted.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, ABC.
ABC.
So.
That's a.
Yeah, 1 minute. Roberta, can you see that? Yeah, I'm hoping that people can see this.
That one.
Oh,
No
So that's upsetting.
Oh, it's touch.
No, it is. Good job.
No signals. Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Let's focus on that. Sorry. Okay, so this map on the left is what was in the resolution. It's meant to show the zoning, basically the zoning map for this section. The ABC Extell Development Site that we're talking about is right here in red. I tried to find, Klari made the comment that the historic district is not shown on this map and would be very helpful to see. It's a little bit, so I pulled this, which is from City Planning's zoning map website. And so you can see here, and I have another page which shows it in more detail. So this box that has the yellow dotted line is the historic district. And zooming in and using resolution, you can see where that historic district sort of sits in this ABC area. This building, I believe, is oddly partially in the historic district and not. I'm not sure how that works, but it might be that ABC combined the buildings at some point. So there's complications on the eastern side.
Forgive me, Seema, can you just give us the streets and where we are? Because it's
Yes.
not that easy to see, and
Sorry, so
we
this
have to get this straight and
Absolutely, sorry.
situated. Yeah.
67th Street is here,
Right.
the north side, the south side bound is 66th Street.
Right.
This is Columbus, and then this side is Central Park West. There are buildings, I think co-op buildings right here, and then the ABC lot is basically a portion, it's this building, and then curves around to these buildings, if you will. Leaves these three residential buildings out. What we think we know, it hasn't yet hit the public records yet, but we believe that 50 West 67 and 40 West 67 sold an option for their air rights to the developer Extell.
Yes, that was told earlier.
It hasn't hit public records, which is what.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that it did come out and was
Yes.
stated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so that's it. Should we discuss the resolution? Hold on. One sec. Stop sharing.
I have a question about the resolution. Why, I don't recall from last month's discussion that 20% FAR versus, not FAR, just, sorry, no. 20% of the square footage versus 20% of the units.
Can we just speak up a little bit, because it's hard in the
At the
room.
time,
I brought it up
square
last month.
footage, you did, okay, I just forgot
Because
about that.
we had the
The square
experience,
footage versus apartments.
we had the experience that apartments could be all studios,
okay.
and that could be the 20%, or 20% of the square footage
Okay.
is much more significant.
Yes. Mandatory inclusionary requires
Right.
it to be
Yeah.
square footage, not.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
That's generally how it's talked about, like in media, that sometimes 20% of what it's talking about square footage.
So what, are we moving toward an action that you're asking us, or do we have people to
Yeah. I
speak
think-
to us?
I think we thought
Resolution.
to first have all the members of the
Yeah.
public who want to
Good.
speak, give them a choice
Good.
to do that first, and then we can have a more
Good.
discussion after that.
Mhm.
Alex?
Yes. We're getting everything ready.
Okay. And will you call out the speakers in order, Alex, or should we
Yeah.
start?
I'll call them out. So the first speaker we have is Austin Celestin, who's on Zoom.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'll just keep it quick. My name's Austin. I was born on the Mitchell-Rama on West End and 65th. I still live there with the rest of my family. I've been in the neighborhood 22 years. Want to stay in the neighborhood, want to raise wife, kids, all of that. I remember when the site was sold in 2018, I've been eagle-eyed, waiting for something to happen, looking forward to something to happen. I would say this is the best opportunity that we have to get affordable housing in the neighborhood. It would be the first affordable housing in this good code at 10024 in 6 years, something like that. We know what's being developed as of right. They're smaller projects, they're condos, they're several $1 million. No one can afford them. The projects that we have seen that we haven't gotten to have affordable housing are larger. I think unequivocally, if you want affordable housing on this site, go big or go home. Like the idea of using R11, R12, that's why we passed an EVS, that's why DCP wrote it in the district for sites like these. We know Extell, Extel's history, you can keep that in mind, but get the zoning, get as much housing as you can. Thanks.
Thank you.
The next speaker that signed up is Gregory Gilderman, who is on Zoom.
Hi, I live at 97th and Riverside. I'm a 30-year Manhattan resident with 2 kids in public schools here in New York. I'll just keep it very brief. I'm not an expert on all the rules and regulations and policies, but I do want to give my very strong endorsement to permitting as many units as possible in this building without any restrictions on the height of the building. That neighborhood has plenty of residential towers. There's nothing detrimental about that at all. I don't think we have to worry about too many people on the Upper West Side. Our population is still below what it was way back in the 1950s. And frankly, this has become a neighborhood of pied-à-terres in a lot of cases. In terms of the amount of affordable housing, 20% sounds great to me. I do think that building market units is probably the best path to alleviating the affordability crisis in the long term, but certainly it's great that a portion of this is committed to having folks who are below the median income, whatever that formula may be. So I just want to give my very strong endorsement to building as much as we can.
Thank you.
So we only received 2 speaker signups, so that's the last of the signups.
Oh, okay. Anyone? Yeah, please.
My name is Victor Kovner, here with my colleague Jeff Drogan. We live at 27 West 67th Street. It is a co-op. I took a look at the draft resolution you were kind enough to make available, and I have some comments that you may wish to consider. If you want, it may be helpful to be persuasive with the Department of City Planning if you would provide a little more background. I think it's known that this particular site was cut out of the Lincoln Center planning in order to induce ABC to move its offices many years ago to this neighborhood. ABC was smaller then and growing. The city wanted to attract it. And I want to say on the whole, they've been a pretty good neighbor. I mean, issues have arisen, but I'd say on the whole, they've been a pretty good neighbor. But they're leaving now. And the case for treating this area outside the overall Lincoln Center planning, it seems to me, is coming to an end. And I think that this block ought to be, or this site ought to be considered as part of the Lincoln Center planning generally. I personally don't agree at all with the last speaker. The area is not underpopulated. Indeed, there are an enormous number of high rises. And I would also, you may wish to consider mentioning in your draft resolution as a matter of history that Extell has already been active in this area. It is building one of the largest and tallest buildings in violation, in the view of many of us, of the Lincoln Center planning rules. I dealt with the litigation a few years ago. Extell won, having lost it in the state Supreme Court. But you have the ability to persuade, or at least to argue persuasively, the Department of City Planning that they ought to be mindful of what Extell has already done to this community and to this district, not for this district. I wouldn't suggest that proposed language, which is my own view, that they've already stuck a dagger into the heart of the Lincoln Center community by building what they're still finishing on West 66th Street between Central Park West and Columbus. I don't want to speak for my building. We haven't addressed the affordable housing proposal yet. My own personal view is that it's a good proposal. I would personally favor more than simply argue for affordable housing. I would also have to consider the possibility of downsizing, given the consequence that this proposed Extell site it constitutes to the overall neighborhood. In terms of affordable housing, I want to say we went through the battle in Riverside South with Trump many years ago, and there was a fair, he wound up providing a significant number of affordable units. That's worked well on the whole. And the notion that affordable units don't belong in this building of Extell, I have to say I don't find persuasive. I don't think there are any affordable units going into the building that is coming to its conclusion on West 66th Street. And I think that's a point that might be weighed with the Department of Planning as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands here? Shelley.
Do you mind coming, do you mind standing and just coming close, just so people have.
My name is Mary Hughes. I've lived on the west side since 1919.
Do you mind just coming to the table, sorry.
Could just
The mic
respond
doesn't
to,
reach. Sorry.
We'll have the
Mr.
board,
Kovner's.
we'll have the board comment after the public is commenting.
I
Okay.
don't know, where do you want me to stand?
Yeah,
So we can hear you.
Oh, yeah, okay. Grab a seat, and I can stand. My name is Mary Hughes. I've lived in the Upper West Side since 1997, so I think that qualifies me as a fairly long-term resident. I live on West 71st Street. And, I'm directly affected by the, monstrosity that is the, 77-story building that is Extell. Extell is, in my opinion, a very bad actor. Extell has created a building that mars the integrity of Center Park. Like it's already the south is destroyed with those matchstick buildings. And now we have this other building, and it just creeped up. Everyone was concerned about COVID. And so probably there wasn't as much community action against it as there might otherwise have been. Suddenly, this thing is growing and growing, and I'm learning there's a 77 story. I don't know how many stories it is. Yeah. So, it's kind of like about the ethos of New York City. Of course, affordable housing is very important. But there's also like, who's going to live in those buildings on the upper floor? Like, who are you building for? You're building for investors. You're building for people who want to plunk their money into New York City. They don't live there. I look directly onto that building. I see all the lights that are not on in those buildings. Nobody lives in them. Someone mentioned the Upper West Side has become a pied-à-terre. I live in a co-op building. I'm on the board of the building. There are no pied-à-terres in our building. So I think, but I think there are a lot of pied-à-terres in these new high-rise buildings that are coming up there. They're destroying the city. Like Center Park is just disgusting at the lower south end because of all these stick buildings that are coming up. So I'll get to my point. I thought the community board, or my question really, I thought the community board and our local representatives, Gail Brewer, who's here today, were honored by our presence, and also by Representative Nadler, possibly Rosenthal, that there was a request put in to change the zoning back, to bring that block back in to the Lincoln Square Historic District. And I think that was done in 2021, is that correct? And so is that still pending, or is that like it somehow become a non-issue? Like what is the community board's position on that?
Both,
Still pending as a non-issue.
It's for the developer, and we don't know enough about city planning, but it's not clear, but at the moment.
Yeah, so I was coming today thinking that I would hear a lot more about that. Of course, affordable housing is important. Let them build at no more than their current height and give 40% for affordable housing. You want your units, I don't know how many, the 77-story building, I've got the address, it got permission as a 25 story building, and then it grew to 77. I mean, what's that all about, right? They put in a plan for 25, and you're seasoned members of the board, but just for someone who is looking at this from the outside, I think that there isn't enough, I don't think there's been enough public outreach. I really feel, I'm not saying by you as a board, but just in general, I think if people, if there are pamphlets handed out on the corner of the street, do you want a 120-story building on the west side next to a 77-story building? It's completely out of keeping with the neighborhood. And, and let them build whatever they, that's more acceptable, and give a higher proportion to affordable housing. So I'm wondering for the board, I mean, maybe this is not the forum to ask about that, but I would like to know, is there any political action that can be taken further to, like, what would be necessary? Can you put me in touch with someone who's active on this issue, who really wants to, Extell is not a good actor. And I think, going to bed with a bad actor is not a good idea, even if you do want affordable housing. I think there are principles involved as well. Although, so I know there's practicalities too, but they're not I don't see them, they do not have the interest of the West Side or New York City at heart at all. And I think we all know that truly. Or just, but somehow, so anyway, I don't know, does anyone want to ask me any questions? Have I spoken too long, or any concerns?
We can't till everyone's spoken.
Okay.
Do we have did you sign up on the list?
I'll
and give us
sign
your
up,
contact?
yeah.
We'll let us know.
Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others? Please.
I just want to speak to what she just spoke to.
Can you give us your name? please?
Jeffrey Drogan, 27 West 67th Street. 27 West 67th Street. I purchased my apartment in 1987. Much has changed on let me just go. In our lobby, we have two pictures of West 67th Street in 1901. It shows our building completed. Our building is a 15-story building. Everything around our neighborhood in 1901 was 2 or 3 stories. So we are greater in scale to what was existing in 1901 than the Extell building is to the scale of our neighborhood now. So does that mean that now you walk down 67th Street, prettiest block in the city, everything's 15 stories? Took years to get there, but someone had to be first. And my answer, or my question to the woman here was, if you don't like high rises, don't live in New York. If you don't like beaches, don't live at the seashore. I mean, New York is a high-rise city. It's always been a high-rise city. People didn't like the Singer building when it went up because it was too big. The Millennium buildings that we have on our block, we all fought them. They're peanuts compared to what's going on. So it's just time. Okay, now what I'd really like to address, the big mistake that I see in the development of our neighborhood, I've been there for more than 30 years. Someone should take the word parking and not make it a dirty word. People have cars. People who buy these $5 and $6 million apartments have cars. There should be a requirement for parking in these buildings. We have the unforeseen consequence of the downtown congestion that stops right on that borderline. No one goes below it, and everybody just circles around in our neighborhood looking for a parking place. There are no public parking places that are available. If they're gonna build 100 apartments, there should be 100 parking spaces or more. Because if you want to rent a parking space in my neighborhood right now, it's $1,000 in a waiting list. And people have cars. You can say anything you want. We don't want cars. People are gonna have cars and they're gonna live in the neighborhood. They built the Millennium without any parking. They built Extell without any parking. I don't think there's been a building built with parking in our neighborhood in 30 years. I think that's a huge mistake. And you're laughing, I don't know whether you're laughing at me or with me,
I'm
but
laughing that I took away her notes,
oh,
if you must know.
Any other public comments? Gail, would you like to speak or do you want to wait for us?
You want to go ahead and then I'll comment.
Are you sure?
I just have a question. If in the resolution, it says we support moving it to R11 zoning. Would that mean that they would be able to build less? I know it would require the 20% affordable housing, but would it mean that they could build less housing if they changed it to R11?
No.
So it's C411 actually, so it's a commercial overlay.
Okay.
It's about the same for R11, just because they have, it's the 12 FAR plus the 20% for the affordable, so like 14.4, whereas R11, that R11 is 15, so it's not a big difference. R12 would be 18 FAR.
Where I was going with the question is, I just want to make sure I wasn't voting for anything that would reduce the amount of.
No,
Okay.
R11 is about the same, but it would make the affordable permanently mandatory, right?
Fine.
And then R12 would be FAR.
So
Right now, just for information, there is no limitation on a requirement for affordable housing. And the current zoning provides a certain liberty in terms of height. Let's put it like that. On the issue of square footage, Riverside South was supposed to have 20% of the units, ended up 12% of the square footage. That's why we're pushing for square footage versus, because it sounded better until we saw what it really was, mainly studios and small apartments. The Lincoln Square District situation is nowhere. Okay, I've incorporated it. It was raised. It was, was promoted and
stalled
so
in
on,
site planning, it's not moving.
and nothing's happening. And now it's largely in the hands of Department of City Planning that's going to come through with a text amendment, which will determine the zoning.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, that is the target of what we should be focused on, trying to influence that, okay, in the best way we can.
Yeah, I think the resolution, I think, is really strong, and I think it speaks to a lot of what we just heard, right? Like, there's a fear that Extell has built these condo buildings that we're worried no one lives in. And I think what we're most focused on right now is making sure that we don't end up with a condo building. I think Austin said really nicely, right? A condo building with $3 million units that none of us can afford. And I think that when the state changed, this is very specific, that the state changed the multiple dwellings law, right? And they said you can do these higher densities like R11 and R12, but the state is saying you have to have affordable units there. And I think if putting that on the table and saying, yeah, you can build a couple more apartments, but now you have to build affordable apartments. And what's great is that if they take this and they build the affordable apartments, they'll also use the state tax incentive, which requires wage floors for the people who are actually going to be building that building. To me, that seems like a win-win, that instead of getting a condo building with gigantic units that none of us can afford, we'll get a rental building with state forced affordable housing for folks to move into. And my only kind of thought on maybe tweaking the resolution would be that we shouldn't pin ourselves down to R11, if that makes sense. So I think we should just say like either R11 or R12, or, one of the new high density districts. Ultimately, like, this is going to get hashed out between our hero Gail and city planning and the developer. And I just think if we as a board are comfortable with, saying we're okay with high density, let's give folks all the tools they need to like make sure that the Upper West Side gets, the best possible outcome here.
Seema, I also wanted to flag that Roberta has her hand raised.
I'm sorry, Roberta, go ahead.
Was it Roberta you were?
You're muted, Roberta.
Yeah, she's
frozen.
And frozen.
What?
Spent most of my life
Yes.
Yes. Oh, Roberta, you're breaking up.
for affordable housing, and I'm very concerned about buildings. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
now we can.
Okay, I've got closer to my screen. I'm very concerned with building a super tall building. I worked against the building, the Extell building on 66th Street. It creates permanent shadows in Central Park every afternoon, every day, and which makes areas of the park uninhabitable for children and others who use the park facility. So I would like to have some limits on this. When I was chair of the board, we worked with Landmark West to put the back in the Lincoln Square Special District, and I feel that we need to have, I think the resolution should definitely be supporting affordable housing, but also mentioning that we do not want permanent shadows in Central Park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. I believe I will start with what I believe to be a fact, that at this point, never having had a complete presentation from city planning, either in the committee or in any other place, it is my understanding that the plans for this new building, which many of us have not seen, are indeed as of right. That Extell's plan, motivation, design is as of right, requiring no other modification or other particular expectation that we could get some things. However, all of us in the room, no, except for 2 or 3, have not been privileged to ever see what is being planned, nor have we been able to have any kind of meeting with the developer to say, okay, what are you what's being planned here? And what can you do? But we do know the as of right. We also know, please, someone who may know more than I do, that city planning, the Department of City Planning, is the one in charge in terms of the building and what is going to happen. That's what's happening. So of course, I, for one, I hope we do what has been written tonight, although I would like my one sentence.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, only because with all due respect, the council members here, and I was absolutely just working with what she has been talking about, and the zoning. I've got the zoning, and you've got to use the right one for everything, and that would be very, very helpful. But just getting back to the fact that the developer and others have not, we haven't been to see anything here. So what I would just suggest, because good work has been done, but I would really appreciate, Seema, if you would take my corrected sentence and more in what we are asking for, because you see, and then the implications of that zoning. Each time there is at the end, and let's use R11. That's in the resolution. That's not the right one. Number one, all of the Lincoln Square District has commercial zoning. It's not residential zone. So when Seema is able to just show that, we can see what is the correct zone and what is our aspiration of zoning. Secondly, and last, I will stop. I completely am sympathetic to all that has been said. I just want to say one point. The Lincoln Square Special District is not a completely residential district. And that's a point. The dominant zoning is commercial, high commercial. That's okay. We can work with that. But please remember, we got to know what's there. And therefore, we have to know then what we want to recommend. I tried just a little bit, because there should be more discussion, to just send to Seema, who's been doing a great job, and just modified her last couple of sentences, wrote that this is the zoning we are recommending because it conforms with the fact that Lincoln Center has always been commercial. It's a C zoning, but that I suggested put in this sentence in this way. And I guess really lastly, that whatever we are going to recommend, I think we should at least be aware that the Lincoln Square area is not completely residential. It's got Lincoln, it's got the arts, you know what it's got. So, and it has a museum and other things. You know what? I would love when we do our work on this, that we also include that the developer should help, as perhaps our council member, I know would want to make room for the museum that we have. So that's, and I think that the fact that our council member is interested, I mean, I'm just saying that I think that's wonderful, and I want us to put it together in that fashion, and that would be our good work.
Thank you, Sheldon.
Just for those who may need a few sentences of definition, okay? The R is residential.
Right.
The C4,
exactly.
C is commercial. C1 and 2, you'll find in the outer boroughs, where there are small, mainly commercial areas with a lot of small residential. And as you go up, there's higher residential, and we're C4, and we're talking about C4, 7. And it's been changed in the thing, except the last one.
I got it.
Sorry.
Yes.
And I think that's important to understand. The effect will be a certain, what equivalent to R11 if it's 11. But in referring to it, it's appropriate. So that's the difference. Okay, it's not a mystery.
One other comment is that, this is an as-of-right development. So at this point right now, we are essentially pleading with not a lot of leverage with the developer to try to include affordable housing and perhaps a community facility. What our goal is, by encouraging city planning to do the C411, is to finally sort of mandate some affordable housing and some other community amenities, if you will. Richard.
Yeah, I think it's a good resolution. With respect to the last paragraph, just a minor tweaks. I would, where it says urges to share details.
Yeah.
That I would point out that we are the applicant of a currently pending zoning amendment.
Yeah.
And that we urge them to share that with us prior to any certification for ULURP.
That's good.
Okay, that's fine. I like that. Okay.
Now, would a text amendment be a ULURP?
Yes.
It definitely would be. Okay.
Yes.
And that'll give us opportunities for.
Yeah,
exactly.
A few things. One, I think it might be helpful for all of us and for our community members who spoke, if maybe Tibita and Seema could address a little bit some of the points that these speakers made. because we've been there already on a lot of that. I mean, and I think there's already been an answer about trying to get this block back into the Lincoln Center Special District, which we've tried and not gotten there, and we have very little leverage towards that. City planning wants to do what they can, but we can't. But anyway, I think that you're talking about where we've been and where we are on some of the things that the public spoke about would be good. Second, following up on what Roberta said about shadows, I just late last night when I was going to sleep, it occurred to me, what if this, whether this building is 1,200 feet tall or not, or taller, how wide it is, and I think my understanding when I ask about this is that we had R11 or R12 or C411 or 12, C412, could then get wider. Because you'd add 20% more bulk somewhere, more square footage, residential square footage. It occurred to me that particularly in the mornings, you might have a really big shadow on Lincoln Center, the plaza of Lincoln Center. There's more than one plaza area there, right opposite. In the summertime, the sun describes a more northerly arc, and I'm wondering about shadows on Lincoln Center. What I'd like to ask, and I try to follow these things, and I don't have any of the expertise that obviously some of our more longstanding land use members have. I am unclear as to, I mean, 1,200 feet is really tall, really, really tall. I'm unclear as to what our, no, sorry, C411, is it C411 and C412, which you referenced in the last already, Ethel, in the last paragraph in the revisions that came out today. I'm not clear. I mean, obviously, I understand that the big advantage is that there would be 20% minimum residential square footage or affordable housing mandatory. That's a good thing. That's the plus. What I don't know is what other baggage R11 and R12, I'm sorry, not RC, would carry with them. Bigger bulk, could they then go more than 1,200 square feet? What would that allow in terms of bulk, height, as a, call it a trade-off for getting the affordable housing? Can you guys answer that?
So, I mean, the square footage, whether it's, if they decide to, let's say we do a C411,
yeah,
that would give them up to 15 FAR. 20% of that would be affordable housing. But that height, depending on how you choose to mass it on the site, if you choose to shove it all to Columbus, could be very, very tall. Like, I don't know how tall off the top of my head, but very tall, especially given fluorides, all those kind of variables that you're talking about. If it's like, you know, a more squat spread out across the site, then that wouldn't have the same height, but there's no height limitation in this zoning.
Yeah, the main limitation, it would be, you know, the width, how narrow you want to make an apartment that you want to sell for a decent amount, right? And
well, an obscene amount.
Yeah, so the number 1,200 comes from like, that's, you know, the tallest that, you know, seems to make sense just from a, you know, having a large apartment with a decent width and, you know, having, you know, the right size windows and everything, that they're not gonna make it 2,000 feet, you know, with a 12 FAR, 15 FAR. It just doesn't make, I mean, theoretically, yes, you could make it this narrow and it could go, you know.
Steinway don't make that.
Yeah, but that was the kind of like a worst case number height wise. Not worst case, highest case number.
And that was more like 12 FAR, is that correct?
Yeah, 12 plus the 14.4 FAR, right? It's 12 plus 20%. Yeah.
While we know very little about what the Department of City Planning is pursuing in terms of the text amendment that we understand is under preparation, but have never seen detail on. We do know that they have stated that their priorities are to address the bulk distribution question and to have a street wall along 67th Street. That's right. Both of those measures would tend to distribute the FAR more broadly on the site than to allow a infinitely tall tower. So I think there is some interest on the part of city planning, but we don't, again, have any detail, whatever.
Time to see
on-
it.
On actually making the site more densely populated at the lower level.
We have, by the way, invited city planning to come. They have not yet taken us up on our invitation. Doug, then.
So, in just sort of digesting this, some people have been referring to the building. This is a site which most likely will have multiple buildings, and there are various parcels. So what I don't know, this is just an open-ended question as to what city planning suggests to be done. It's a mystery as to exactly what the text amendment is going to be. And of course, the context is also about condo development. If it becomes, if a portion of the site has R11 and R12, you know, are we going to get 20% of a rental building only, and then the rest is all condo? It just begs a lot of questions as to what this is going to look like at the end, what they can do and what city planning is. It's just, I wish that city planning was more transparent with us, the neighborhood, not because I think they're doing anything terrible, but I'd just like to know, and I think maybe we can get on board if we had a better understanding of what this whole site is gonna look like. And again, it is almost certainly gonna be multiple buildings and perhaps some rentals and perhaps some condo and community space. There's a lot of open-ended questions.
Yes, Richard.
Yeah, just to follow up what Beverly said, we may want to consider adding a paragraph to the resolution which urges city planning to, that any rezoning take into account the need to reduce or to limit the height of the building and to distribute the bulk more evenly throughout the site, something along those lines.
Yeah, but I want to bring us back to, I want to bring us back to what we voted on last time in this committee, right? Which is that we wanted to maximize affordable housing, and that
This wouldn't affect the FAR. It would simply redistribute the bulk.
So what we discussed and what we reached a consensus on was the idea that we wanted to maximize affordable housing, and we were willing to make a trade-off of height for maximizing affordable housing. That's what the consensus.
Well, it's
was.
changed.
Now, I know that prior to many of us being on this committee, there was a different opinion, but as far as what we have discussed with this committee as it's currently constituted, that was the case, and that's what is reflected in the.
I think that's right, but if we're at the same time recommending mandatory R11 zoning, there's no reason not to address the issues of bulk, the issue of bulk. They're not even consistent.
Could you draft a sentence for us?
Come on.
I'll try.
I sent
I
you.
just say that it's more preferable, that it's preferable to have bulk rather than height. That's your opinion. But some other people, myself included, would rather have a very tall building and then a lot of open space.
But it's not an either or.
It may not be. Not a block,
Let's let Matt go.
not a block of medium, tall, a little less tall buildings. I don't think that's necessarily desirable from anybody's point of view.
The square footage that's gonna be built would be the same with or without what I'm suggesting. And the 20% of square footage for affordable housing would be the same. The only question is whether that bulk would be more evenly, somewhat more, it's not gonna be dramatically.
That's what I'm debating with you.
The people that live on the block
Yeah.
would rather see a very large, tall building on Columbus Avenue than a building that went all the way down from Columbus Avenue to Central Park.
Right.
Put the big building where the big buildings are and leave the area where the small buildings are small, rather than have a huge block of buildings that goes from Columbus Avenue to whatever the building is, to the church.
That's what the shadow studies showed, right?
City planning's sort of at least spoken desires to do the same, to put the bulk on the avenues and keep it lower on the block.
I think it might be helpful just to talk through process and timing, just for folks who aren't familiar. Like normally how an application like this goes is there would be the first time that the community would get involved is during the EAS, right? The environmental assessment, where they start to figure out, as you know, Klari was saying, what will the shadows be? What will the impact on other buildings be? All sorts of that. Then
if it's a ULURP.
if it's a ULURP, then it would enter ULURP and it would come to the community board and we'd have a chance to discuss. The borough president would have an opportunity. It goes to city planning commission. It goes to council. Council can make modifications. So I think at this stage, because we are so far before any of that can happen, some of these discussions might be premature. These ideas about like, what should the bulking be, all sorts of that. I think at this stage, what we really need to do is say, we as a community want this project to go through ULURP. We don't want something by right. We want this map change that forces it to have affordable housing. And we recognize that that's going to mean that we're mapping a commercial district with high residential FAR equivalents. And I think that's kind of where we should aim to get to, because I think we're just playing with like things we don't know if we're trying to say, well, we want it to look like this, we don't want it to look like that. I think at this stage, we should just say, we're open for a discussion. This is what we are willing to give, which is that the building is going to be taller and bigger and have more apartments. And then let's have the discussion during the EAS. We'll talk about the bulking and the shadows during that. And I think that will kind of put us in a much better position going forward.
Okay, let's do Shelley and then Gail. Do you want to go after that?
Okay, officially, everything you said was right, but there was one thing that we experienced that was different. With the rezoning of 9700 10th Street, which is the largest rezoning in the history of the city, we met with city planning prior to the ULURP being formulated and being presented. So we had our input in advance. We heard we asked for designs, they provided us with designs. It's conceivable, okay, that something like that could happen. So we could recommend that in advance of the certification, that we have communication with city planning on the ideas that are coming up, so we can be supportive of a ULURP. The worst thing for them would be to have a ULURP rejected by the community, okay? So it's to their advantage, and they did it before, and Edith, who was the head of Manhattan, is still there.
Yeah, she's the one we can talk to.
Look at the last
Shelley?
paragraph.
Yeah. Last paragraph
It's in there.
sort of does that, but you may wish to strengthen it with some words.
Okay.
Yes.
And we added some language.
So let me have that, I have it in my sheet.
Shelley, the one difference that I think is pertinent to this is that was a neighborhood corridor rezoning led by the city versus this is a spot application.
It was initiated by the board.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that there is a difference between a neighborhood that covers a tremendous number of lots and one specific site that I think actually is pertinent to the way that this is.
All I know is they took us.
Okay, just
block
30
by block,
seconds.
Lot by
Okay,
lot.
I'm sorry, Gail. Just one factual thing, 30 seconds. As far as we know, what has been before city planning, the application has been in these silent times, Landmark West as a party and CB7. There are some people, 2 or 3 people, who did have a meeting with Edith, who is, I'm sorry, the last name, the head of city, and she spoke to the group. I would like to know, and for example, just what you have begun to say, and that is, is city planning the applicant now? Or is city planning and Landmark West continuing? I have no answer yet, but I did speak to Landmark West, but maybe you know.
The answer is our application is on hold and will not come off hold. It is on hold forever.
Thank you.
And what is considered by city planning will be a city planning application.
Exactly, and so that vitiates what you are saying, which is so important, and that is, we haven't seen at all the application that city planning is now working on and has not met. I mean, frankly, I haven't heard anything like this in years, so that they haven't come to this room or to anybody or to 8 people and said, we are planning, this is a joint application. It's going to occur in the next 5 months or 8 months or whatever. We don't know. And the very last thing, but I repeat it, I have to stress again, the question of housing, good housing, the right housing is paramount for us. But it is the Lincoln Square district. There could be, and there should be, other integrated needs. And I repeat again, a museum that could expand. There are others that are part of the district along with good housing, new housing, but don't think only of that because it can be a terrific neighborhood because it was supposed to have been, and we have to join in to make it that.
So one point, I just wanted to say, going back in the history, yes, we did join and pass a resolution along with Landmark West on extending the Lincoln Square Special District to include the ABC site. The one thing I find redeeming about where we are now is that even if we had prevailed, there is nothing about affordability in the Lincoln Square Special District.
Yeah, that's true.
So even if we won, or whatever you want to call it, it wouldn't address affordability. At least now we're talking about the potential of affordability, because we may have had 0 had we prevailed in that, election.
We're doing this.
Gail, we're ready for you. Thank you for your patience.
I'm fine, and it's a helpful conversation. I'm so sick of this stuff. All right, so, the difference in the past, when we did, Riverside Center, and you did Riverside South, is that there was a ULURP there, change of zoning, and we have none of that here. It's like an open slate, and I have done 200 ULURPs in my life, or maybe 250 of them. I've never seen open slate, so it is hard.
Terrible.
That is a terrible situation. Thank you to Landmark West and the Community Board and George James, who done a tremendous amount of work. Was produced a wonderful document, moved, as Victor suggested, Lincoln Square Special District to ABC. In the previous administration, I think, or even into the beginning of the Adams administration, city planning was interested. I don't, you could use it maybe as a stick and say, if you don't do this, we're gonna do that, something. But for whatever reason, I think they don't like the bulk of it. It was much lower, looks like all the other buildings. Tower on the base is what it is. And we got absolutely nowhere. They will not sign off on it. Now, we can keep trying, but they are not interested. It doesn't include affordable. Doesn't mean that you couldn't perhaps manage to use it as a stick to get some affordable. We got nowhere. So then they said they were going to do, city planning, they were as an alternative to do their own design, their own plan. However, it too included 0 affordable housing. And so just so you know, that was a discussion as far as city planning. I'm sure Edith would come to another meeting at this point because she wanted to know where we're at. Fine. I know Gary Barnett. I know him from Riverside Center. I know him from the Bell Nord. I've had interactions for 30 years. He has not changed. And the issue is he always wants tall, he always wants condo, and he always hates affordable. That's how he is. So you have to know that going in. City planning pushed us. Go work with him. Find a developer and you come up with a plan. So we went, and the issue for him was, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And so we want affordable housing. We don't want a tall building. That's what we want. That's what we really want. And of course, you end up with 20-25% affordable. Not yet, we had talked about it, doing a C4 R11, more, okay, not at such a tall building, maybe, I mean, I hate to say 1100, that's tall enough. And maybe 849 for the affordable. Any affordable in his mind would be a separate building, because if we can get him to do as we did with Riverside Center, don't forget, they're both Riverside Center and Riverside South have some rentals. Here, he only wants to do condos, and then make the affordable a nonprofit that would have its own building and be run by a nonprofit. We could probably figure out the nonprofit. At the same time, if you can't take affordable and mold it into the same building as the condo, it just doesn't work. I hate this notion. It's almost like it's not a poor door, but it's two different buildings. If you go down to, he did the same thing, right next to the Brooklyn Bridge. If you go down there, you'll see at the two bridges location, you'll see an affordable and a high income. So then we say to ourselves, okay, so now we have him talking about affordable, and we have a condo building. But, you know, it's a little loosey-goosey with him. He always sells as soon as he buys, he sells. You know, he doesn't, gets the change, and he goes, I'm thinking, you know, we discussed it. We're like, wow, we're gonna be able to do this without any stick, right? This would be a restrictive deck. We've done restrictive decks. They make me a little nervous because they're not as strong as a Euler. So then we have another conversation, which is hard. I mean, this tall building, Landmark West said the advantage of just talking about R11 for a minute is the bulk at the bottom, because it would be a bulk at the bottom, means that there could be some middle income families, as opposed to the top will be, God knows what the cost is, and maybe some pied-à-terres, as somebody else said. This is like Hobson's choice, right? You know, rock and a hard place. And so right now we're open. City planning does not like R11, C4 or not. They don't. We do need a C4. That's an undisputed issue. Right? That's not even an issue. But they don't like it. They don't think it fits into their plan. I don't know what the friggin' means with that. Doesn't fit into our plan. So they haven't really heard this notion of we want the stick with this Euler. They've only said, go make a deal, right? So that's where we're at, to be honest with you. But I do think city planning will come to a discussion. I think at this point they will come. I will say just in terms of the Riding Academy, which is the only historic district building. It's not a landmark, but it's part of the historic district. And that is of interest to the American Folk Museum. It's enough space, they can renovate it. They sold the building, so they have money, and they're not, you know, bereft of money. And so they would be, and they're right next door in the Pops, as you know, in the Mormon church.
Yes.
So they're interested. The price that he wants is, I think, like $100 million. Come on.
Yeah.
So they have to negotiate on all of that. That's their problem. But so that's a separate issue. That's the easiest part of the whole thing, because they renovate inside, it's all in good shape outside. But this issue of how do you get, you know, to the point that you have, yes, affordable, but I want, you know, some 2 bedrooms, not all single, you know, I want families. Maybe some, you know, some singles with families. Anyway, that's where we're at. Now, city planning hasn't signed off on anything. I think they should come and talk to everybody. This is a horrible situation, to be honest with you. So I think Seema and everyone has done a great job with the, you know, not great cards to play, to be honest with you. I never was in an experience where there's no Euler. I'm a Euler queen. I love Euler. But there's no Euler here. There's nothing to work with unless we try to do this. And R11, not R12, was even worse.
Well, I guess my one question, do you think there's a world where if we said like R12 is okay, like, does that help you?
No, R11, no. What helps me is getting city planning to agree to, if this is what we want. I mean, R11 would give us what we want. And well, in terms of affordable housing, it gives us this very tall building.
Thank you.
And then the question is, where is the shadow? That would be based on an analysis. And you know, whether anybody would be living in there, I don't know.
Do you think they would support C4?
If we all come in and say, this is it, we're not doing, I call loosey-goosey, we're not doing the restrictive deck. I mean, we would just all work together, say this is it. I mean, he won't want, don't forget, I know Gary, he does not want any restrictions. In other words, he likes to cut a deal with Gail, because he knows me. He wants to cut a deal with Gail and the community, because he does not like, there was gonna be a hotel, right? And because the hotels now all require special permits, which is kind of like I don't know, Euler light, for lack of a better word. You have to go through the.
Board of Standards and Appeals.
You have to go through the process, right? He doesn't want that, so he got rid of the hotel just because it requires a special permit.
Would it make sense for our resolution to include an invitation to city?
Yeah, it'd be great.
To come to our committee meeting?
Yeah,
I just gave the words.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have could
Can
somebody
we
back
do
here?
that?
I'm sorry.
Gail, thanks so much
I just gave
for
them
that great information. And I wanted to know, the city planning, they have made.
To range
plan.
minds.
Do you know how many stories high the highest building was on their plan?
I don't know. I mean, they would just, maybe they could work on this bulk issue that you all talked about also. I mean, you have to decide if that's what you want, bulk versus height. But I'd assume, high, but again, no affordable housing in their plans. I don't know the height.
Just a very, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I guess I can say this at this public meeting because it's a public meeting and anything anybody has said already is in the public domain. I am concerned that if we let it be out, as this resolution would, that we are amenable to even more height and bulk, or that we don't care about height and amenable to more bulk, whether it's just our C411 or C412 as well, that we can get and are like and may well get snookered, because what we may end up with is taller, bigger, and no affordable housing, given that.
We're not saying.
No, we're not saying any of that.
We don't say we don't care about height.
No one
I know
reading
it-
our
no, I
resolution would come
understand
to
that it
it.
doesn't say that, but we've had a lot of conversation about it. And I did take a straw vote at the last meeting, and I did not endorse the view of no matter what, we'll go for height rather than, if we can get affordable housing.
We're not there.
Largely because I think we could get snookered. So I think we just really need to be careful, given our lack of cards to play, and even Gail's relative lack of cards to play at the Department of City Planning. We could end up with a bunch of bad stuff.
A bunch of what?
A bunch of bad things and no good things.
Well, I think right now, the situation we're in is all bad stuff.
Yeah.
There's, a huge
Yeah.
building, no affordable housing, and very little for us to say
Can't
about
get
it.
worse.
So, exactly. So our goal is.
Beverly,
to
did
try
you
to
have
make
your
some
hand up?
numbers.
Yeah, just
Thank you.
saying, what we're recommending here is a particular
Victor.
zoning that
Thank you.
requires
I understand that.
mandatory housing that's affordable. So I don't think anyone could look at that and say, it's just about height. It's not. It's linked, and it's linked in law.
We got
So,
snookered so many times.
I don't worry so much.
Thankfully, this time it's state law.
Could
State said it, much harder to get snookered in Albany.
And we might be able to, you know better than I do, but we might be able to get with the, I call 421A, what's the new number?
485.
We might be able to get more affordable housing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the answer, but we might be able to. So in other words, you could play with the number. I'd love to get more than 20% if we've got this awful building. I'm just saying,
And the nice thing is, once it enters Euler, if we can get it to Euler, then Gail gets more power.
Yeah, I
Because
do.
at the end of the day. it
Yes,
has to
of
go to the
course.
city council.
when we did Riverside, thanks to these two,
Yeah.
we got another 500 units at 11:59 before midnight.
Could I just add one
11:59:30.
sentence?
Yes.
Could I just, maybe the time is not right, but because this is a great group. But I'm sorry, it's a voice. It would be good, I think, because in previous experience, what I'm about to say was helpful. We managed to get a couple of experts who were more expert than we were. You remember Bob Davis, Michael Kortler, and helped us in some of the Riverside stuff. We did a charrette. I think that a part of this committee, the group was done very well, but that we could work some more on what the understanding of what is being proposed. None of us have a complete understanding of it because none of us have seen everything that they say they are doing. And then I think that we could then, a goodly group of this crowd here, but with one or two others who are really expert and don't have an axe to grind, but in technical things can help us.
Well, George James has been helping.
George James is great.
He's been helping.
And he has been, and I spoke to Sean, and he said, look, George worked for 4 years to give us a big proposal, and it's now not happening. I'm also talking, though, about someone who could help us talk through some of what you are saying. Should there be, should it go high up? How can we fit in something? I mean, that we were very much helped by a couple of experts to understand and then propose it. So we're not going cold, but we know what Gail has said, what would be good to do, and we should do that. I think that would be good. We wouldn't lose anything, and we could do very well by being smarter, and having them come to us. I mean, city planning, we haven't seen them. 2 or 3 people have, but we haven't seen anything.
Well, we haven't seen anything of what they're doing now.
Could I suggest that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
You wanna, I wrote down what, wanna add to the first part of the second,
The second bullet.
second bullet.
Yeah, so
If you could just read it out.
urges DCP to share details of the text amendment they're preparing for the site and engage in detailed pre-certification discussions with CB7.
Perfect.
And to attend the meeting with.
Yes, and then I thought a separate bullet for.
Oh, all right.
Or something like, somewhere in there,
I
yes.
call the question.
Yep.
Whatever it is the amendments have produced.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
As amended, sorry, all in favor?
Committee members.
Committee members first. Okay.
Ethel?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, what, should I be
On the resolution as amended.
Okay, I guess I'll
We're,
go.
we're voting to serve liquor at our future.
Now you're talking.
Okay,
Too high.
sorry. Hands down. Any opposed?
I think.
Did you get Louisa's hand?
No, I didn't. Thank you so much. Sorry.
I don't know how Roberta.
What about?
Roberta's not a member,
She's
but
not a committee
we
member.
we can take non-members now.
Yeah, we'll do that. Hold on, any opposed? No, any abstaining?
Yes.
1. Any ineligible? 0. So that the committee vote is 14-0-1-0, and then non-committee.
One in favor.
All in favor?
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Roberta, are you voting?
I don't know if she's there.
Okay, so I think
I don't
it's
see
3.
it.
I'm abstaining.
Okay, 3. Any opposed? 0, 1. Any ineligible? 0. Okay. I did. So the non-committee vote is 3-0-1-0.
Okay.
So one more email. I will revise this. Send this out to you guys. Yeah. I think that's it, right?
Great job.
We could do
Excellent, everybody. Good work.